guys, and welcome to the Fish Room. I'm Rachel O'Leary and it's time for a species spotlight. Now this week you guys have been requesting, especially on my Instagram, that I do a species spotlight on Licorice Gourami or Parosphromenus. Now while they are fantastically beautiful, they are a very challenging species and one that I feel should be kept by advanced hobbyists who are going to breed them, and that's for a few reasons. The first reason is because most of their habitat, which are primary rainforests throughout Southeast Asia, are really critically threatened, and unfortunately they're threatened from human beings. A lot of the rainforest is being deforested, the logs sold, and palm oil plantations put in. And this means that these guys, instead of having slow-moving rivers that feed into these peat swamps where they like to live, are instead having to adapt to smaller, more stagnant bodies of water, and a lot of the species just can't withstand that. So it's entirely likely a lot of these species will disappear over time. So it's critically important that folks who get these species try to breed them and keep them adequately in order to preserve them. Now the good news about that is they are fantastically beautiful and can be bred, but it is a bit of a challenge because they have some very unique water requirements. So let's take a look and I'll tell you more about the species that I have in stock and the general family of Parosphromenus. Now I am by no means an expert on this species, though I have kept quite a few. And my goal is simply to get you guys to look into more research about them and do what you can in order to preserve these wonderful little fishes. So let's take a look. Now upon first glance you might say, well, these aren't very beautiful. What's the big deal? But when they're in breeding dress, like that guy by the sponge filter, they are absolutely breathtaking fish. Now it's just the males that get extremely bright like this, but they are phenomenally beautiful little fish. The tricky part is that these guys, as I mentioned, come from peat swamps, which means there is tons and tons of humic acid, which means their pH is exceptionally low, down to 3 or 4 in some cases, but on average closer to 5, with 6.5 really being the top of the line that you can keep them. They'd have very little carbonate hardness at all. So a GH of less than 2 and a KH of less than 2 is really critical for breeding these species, and it's thought that it's because bacteria cannot survive in those conditions, and their eggs are very sensitive to the onslaught of bacteria. So if you want to breed these guys, it's important to keep that in mind. Now this species I brought in as Parosphromenus nagyi, and I'm pretty sure that's what they are. They're a licorice, or a strawberry licorice gourami, and there's 18 known species of Licorice Gourami and a whole bunch more that are said to be CF or comparable to or AFF or akin to, that have not been formally classified. But that's an entirely different can of worms. These guys can take a temperature range of about 72 to 82, with mid 70s, around 76 to 78 being ideal for spawning. They are cave spawners, so that's actually why I have that white cave in there, just in case someone got in the mood. The male sort of entices the female into the opening of the cave, where they spawn, and then they attach the eggs to the roof of the cave with a really tiny bubble nest, basically. These guys don't make giant bubble nests like a lot of the other gourami or labyrinth fishes. In fact, they don't use their labyrinth organ that much. They come from, deeper water, comparatively speaking, and only use their labyrinth organ when in really stagnant pools. These guys are totally peaceful despite that randy male chasing folks. And, you know, they're notorious for requiring live foods. Now, you'd want to feed them things like baby brine or daphnia moina. Avoid the larger daphnias because they're all shell and not a ton of nutrition for such a small fish. And you can feed them some worms, but you don't want to feed too many as they're considered to be a bit fatty for this species. I've never personally bred this species, so I can't give you a ton of advice, though it's said that if you maintain them properly, you'll start to see babies emerge because the female guards the territory around the cave and the male guards the territory in the cave. I actually have these guys eating dried foods, which is great, especially because I travel so much. Makes it easy for other people to feed them for me. Now, in this quarantine environment where there are so many, only the dominant male is fired up. In general, you would want to keep these guys in pairs. In as small of a tank as 2.5 gallon, but with 5 gallon probably being the easiest to maintain. Gentle filtration like sponge filtration is required, as well as that soft water, which you can achieve by using rainwater, RO water, or by adding a lot of peat or almond leaves. Almond leaves are generally my preference, and once these guys are sold to the point that I'm just keeping my own group, I will add a ton of leaf litter in this aquarium to promote spawning. In the wild, there is very little light where they're from, which is probably why they've adapted to that extremely bright courtship coloration. And in the wild, there are no underwater plants. There are thorny thickets of like wood and jumbles of emergent growth on the side of the streams, but not a whole lot underwater. That being said, they seem to really like plants. The problem is that in the extremely soft water conditions that they prefer, most plants fail to thrive. So deep areas of leaf litter, some driftwood, things like that are really, really great for these guys. You know, I know the females are kind of plain, but I still think that they are absolutely gorgeous. These guys get a maximum size of 1.5 inches. These are adults in this aquarium. In the wild, they also are at risk from predation in natural ways, things like herons and kingfishers. I really encourage you guys, if you're interested in working on these guys, to go over to parosphromenus.org, and I'll put a link to that in the description. They have all kinds of species information, conservation information, as well as a database of folks that are working with these incredible little fish. Now I'm going to drop some food in so they'll hopefully stay still. And I'm just dropping in some freeze-dried worms, which they've been taking really readily. You know, it's usually said that these guys won't take any dried food, so I'm especially pleased that they are, because it makes it easier for my customers to get them adapted to their aquariums in order to work with them as well. Now, this is a species that I will rarely carry, and that's because I really feel as though they need to be worked with and bred by the folks that get them. So if you're interested in them, make sure you realize that they're not a fish that I really recommend keeping in a community aquarium or a large aquarium. These are definitely a species that thrive in a small aquarium, and while you can keep them with other small peaceful fishes like Boraris or the chili rasboros, it's really the best idea to maintain them alone in order to increase the chances of breeding. What's interesting as well is that there's 3 kinds of courtship that they do. There's head down, head up, or lateral courtship, or straight across. This species is a head down courtship, so when they're spawning, the males actually, you know, are nose down in the aquarium, which I think is kind of interesting. But as you can see, these guys are readily taking the dried foods, which makes my life a lot easier. And judging by that breeding dress on a few of these males, they are really happy. They're gorgeous fish. As always, thanks for watching, guys. I hope you enjoyed learning a little bit more about Licorice Gourami. Let me know below in the comments if you have any suggestions or questions for species for me to look at in the future. As always, your guys' support is incredibly appreciated. Make sure you hit the notification bell and subscribe so you don't miss any of my upcoming videos. Summer tubbing is really going to be ramping up soon. And I am traveling to Denver, Colorado this week for the Aquatic Gardeners Association convention. Let me know below if you guys are going to be there. As always, stop by my Instagram, my Facebook, and my website, MsJinx.com, where you can find my upcoming speaking engagements and information on all things nano.